Now that we have completed a tax return for Quebec, let's take a look at how easily you can change and file a tax return for another province other than Quebec using DTMax. In Canada, most provinces file only one income tax return, except for the province of Quebec, where you have to file both federal and provincial separately. Filing a tax return for someone in another province will take you around the same time it takes to file a tax return for someone in Quebec. All the steps and procedures will remain the same as shown in previous videos when filing a tax return for someone in another province. Only a few changes will be needed. Let's do an example. Let's assume that Ms. Susan Peters has moved to Toronto. Before we begin, you will need to locate Ms. Peters' personal information from Toronto. Locate the Exercise Files folder and double-click to open it. Inside the Exercise Files folder, you should see a folder named A Single Taxpayer. Double-click on it to open it. Inside this folder, you should see a PDF named Personal Information Ontario. Double-click to open it. This is the information we're going to enter for Ms. Peters' new address. Let's go back to DTMax and begin inputting her new information. If you are not on the Client List screen, go to the Client List screen now and locate the file Susan Peters on. Remember, always type the family name first when looking for someone. So type Peters. Make sure the name option is checked and press Enter or click OK. Click on Peters on Susan to highlight it. Double-click or press Enter to go to the data entry screen. As you can see, her personal basic information from before is being displayed, and it shows her old address for Quebec. Let's make the changes to reflect her new address for Ontario. The first thing we'll need to do is change the province of residence on December 31st. And when we look at her information sheet, we see that the province of residence on December 31st is Ontario. Click on the drop-down arrow to the right of Province of Residence to make a selection and select Ontario. Next, enter the street address, apartment, and city. For the province of mailing, click on the drop-down arrow to the right and select Ontario. Next, change the postal code accordingly. Next, we can skip the next three inputs and go to Alone. This keyword is not needed for a client living in Ontario. This keyword is only for taxpayers in the province of Quebec who are eligible for the living alone amount. So we would need to delete this keyword. Remember, to delete a keyword, first click in the field of the keyword you wish to delete to highlight it. In this case, we're going to click in the Alone field to highlight it if you're not there already. With the field highlighted, press the Ctrl backspace keys to delete the keyword. As you can see, the Alone keyword is gone from the data entry screen, and the drug insurance keyword is now highlighted. The keyword drug insurance will also need to be deleted, as this is a keyword used only for taxpayers in Quebec. With the keyword already highlighted, press the Ctrl and backspace keys to delete this keyword. The keyword drug insurance is gone from the data entry screen. Now Ms. Peters' tax return is updated with her new address, and so we'll need to recalculate her return. But before we recalculate her taxes, we've got one more thing to do for her taxes to be totally complete, and that is to apply for the Ontario Trillium Benefit. As a resident of Ontario, Ms. Peters can apply for the Ontario Trillium Benefit. The Ontario Trillium Benefit is similar to that of the Quebec Solidarity Tax Credit. Credits will vary depending on the provinces. Ontario and Manitoba have property, real estate, or residence tax credits. British Columbia has replaced its renter's tax credit with a BC sales tax credit. DTMax will calculate the Ontario Trillium Benefit automatically for all your clients living in Ontario. But DTMax will not have all of the information needed to give the clients their full credit, so you would need to input this information. The Ontario government will pay its citizen a monthly payment to all taxpayers who pay rent or property tax and qualify to receive the Ontario Trillium Benefit. Ms. Peters pays rent, and so we must enter this information so that DTMax can calculate the correct Ontario Trillium Benefit for her. So let's go back for a moment to Ms. Peters' personal information to see how much she paid in rent and enter this information. When I look at the rent receipt, I can see Ms. Peters has paid $18,000 in rent for the year. Let's enter this information into DTMax. Type the keyword residence. Make sure you don't overwrite the other keywords when typing. Remember to select a keyword with a drop-down arrow before you start typing. When you are finished, press Enter or click OK. The keyword residence appears in the data entry screen with a drop-down option menu for you to choose from. Keep in mind that if your client lives in Ontario and is a native resident on a reserve, make sure that you select Indian principal residents on a reserve, because they are not eligible to receive the property tax credits. Ms. Peters is renting, so she is a tenant. Select the option Tenant. Enter her information from the rent receipt. First is the street. The street of the principal residence is required for Manitoba and Ontario residents. Next is city. The city of the principal residence is required for Manitoba and Ontario residents also. Next, enter the postal code. For the keyword months, enter 12 to show that she was there for the whole year. This is required for Ontario and Manitoba residents. For rent paid, enter $18,000. This is required for Ontario and Manitoba. Keep in mind that if this was a tax return for Manitoba, the keyword roommate would have shown up here. This is required for Manitoba residents only. If the taxpayer shared accommodations with one or more individuals, only one person can claim the property tax credit for the sharing period. Next is the keyword landlord. The name of the landlord is required for Manitoba and Ontario tenants. Enter the name RealStar for the landlord. Next, for the keyword OTB one payment, use this keyword to indicate if the taxpayer has elected to receive the OTB entitlement in one payment in June instead of receiving it monthly. I normally leave this option blank unless the client tells me otherwise, so just skip this for now. Next, for the keyword Energy Property Credit, select Yes to apply for the Ontario Energy and Property Tax Credit. And last, use the keyword Northern Ontario to indicate if the taxpayer lived in a principal residence in Northern Ontario on December 31st and is applying for the Northern Ontario Energy Credit. Select No for this option. Please note, if ever you are doing a tax return for a senior living in Ontario, use the keyword Senior Home Grant to apply for the Ontario Senior Homeowners Property Tax Grant. Now Ms. Peters' tax return is complete and updated with her new address and rent information. With that done, we'll need to recalculate her tax return, and it is important that you use the right recalculate option to do this. Keep in mind that pressing F9 or clicking on the Tax Return tab is not recommended for recalculation if a tax return has already been calculated. You will have to use the recalculate option to make sure that the tax return is fully recalculated. There are two ways in which you can recalculate a tax return. One is to press Alt and F9 keys, or select the option Recalculate Current Client from Tools menu. Click on Recalculate Current Client now. With the tax return recalculated, as you can see, only a federal return is displayed, meaning that this tax return is for someone living outside of the province of Quebec. So now we have just completed a tax return for someone who is single, had no income, and lived alone in the province of Quebec and Ontario. Please take the time to go over the answers in the folder named Answers to see if all your answers are correct. In the upcoming videos, we are going to begin looking at how to prepare a tax return for a taxpayer with a spouse and begin entering working income. We're going to look at entering different types of income from T-slips and relevés for both Canada and Quebec. Looking forward to seeing you over there. Bye for now.